Mm-hmm. I would think that it probably would have looked more like the neighboring house, which is this nice little clapboard
2-story.
Yeah. House that looks very tropical.
What year did they live there? In the 20s?
Yeah, this was the 1930s census that gave that address.
Oh, okay.
So, apparently.
I'm not sure. But yeah, the location of that house and the size makes me suspicious.
Right. According to the census data, the Mesas owned their house. So that actually would have been a pretty big deal. The father-in-law owned a store.
Mm-hmm.
So also a big deal. Apparently, the newlyweds weren't too put off by living in such a busy household because Elena soon became pregnant. Sadly, she miscarried in November of 1929.
Oh.
She was devastated by the loss, and her health began to decline. Initially, her family thought she was just depressed, but then she started to cough and lose weight. Her mother finally convinced her to go to the hospital and see a doctor. The doctors immediately...
Was there an outbreak, or did she just get sick? I mean, I guess living with that many people.
Right. So the doctors knew what the deal was. They pretty much just looked at her.
They could diagnose tuberculosis because that's what everyone was getting.
Right. And there was an outbreak.
There
were several cases in the area, and it is a highly contagious disease.
Yeah.
So and with no...
That's the one that they send people to the country.
Right.
Just the breathing.
They felt like they usually would build these sanitariums and
that's
mountains.
Right. Sanitarium, yes.
And then they would have these nice little sun porches.
Because there was one in Colombia.
There was.
I learned about something in this state on Obscura Day.
It is right behind the State Historic Preservation Office and the Department of Archives.
Okay.
And it's been abandoned. It's really creepy.
Oh, that's what that was.
Yeah, you just drive up.
Oh, that campus is very cool.
Yeah. It must have been pretty scenic. They have all these little cottages where the doctors and the nurses lived.
So did you live, was that an immediate death sentence, or could it
depends.
Go away?
I mean, they had no real way to treat it.
If you were old or young, you probably would die. But if you were maybe a healthy person, there's a better chance.
It really just seemed to be how your body adapted to it.
Okay.
So we know that Elena's youngest sister, Celia, and her father both died in 1934, presumably from tuberculosis.
Okay.
Her mother died in 1940, and her sister died in 1946.
Oh, my gosh.
And so we think that they all had it. And the mother and the sister apparently were able to live with it longer than the father and the younger sister.
Yeah.
When Elena goes to the Marine Hospital for tests, they send Carl to her.
The Count,
yes, to take a blood sample. He later wrote about this historic meeting.
Of course he did.
Yes, his autobiography. So this is what he wrote. I hardly looked at the patient as I entered the room. The first thing I noticed of her personality as I bent down to take a drop of her blood from one of her fingertips, rather than one of her ears, which were too exquisitely lovely to mar, was that her hand was unusually small, its long tapering fingers the loveliest I had ever seen. So apparently she didn't want to look at him while he was sticking her finger, so she covered her face with her hand. So he had not actually, got a full view of her face. So he wrote, she withdrew her hand to answer me, and I looked into the face of an earthly beauty, the face of my dreams and visions, the face of the bride which had been promised to me by my ancestor 40 years before. Right. Bum, bum, bum!
He can sure spin a yarn.
Right? Carl was quite distressed when he discovered that Elena was already married. How could this be? She was literally his dream girl.
Meant for me.
Yeah. Of course, we can't forget that Carl was also married, but that's insignificant when it comes to fated love, right?
And his wife was in Zephyr Hills.
Yes.
That's far, far from Key West.
Solidly built German wife was far, far away. Carl wrote also in this autobiography, quote, what after all did it matter if she belonged to another? Hadn't I also belonged to another years ago?
Yep.
What was there in a husband's name or even in a husband's existence? All this had very little to do with me and Elena.
It had nothing to do with you.
Absolutely not. So, as I'm sure you figured out by now, poor Elena was diagnosed with tuberculosis.
She did not make it.
And it, as I said, was practically impossible to cure. But Carl was determined to save her. even though his qualifications weren't exactly suited for this task.
He was not at all qualified.
No.
He wasn't even qualified to be a count.
No. Apparently not. So, because he thought his relationship with Elena was meant to be, then, of course he had to save her. Of course he could save her. His hopes were raised when her...
Did she not have a real doctor?
That's a really great question because...
I mean, she's in a hospital.
Right.
That's like a legit hospital. There's doctors. So someone's letting this Yahoo tell a patient that he can save her, and they're not saying, "Oh, don't mind the count. He's crazy."
Exactly.
We got him from the mental hospital down the street. So many questions.
Yeah.
But the story is...
Yes, the story is that he soon was...
smitten.
Well, he's definitely smitten.
Yeah.
His hopes were raised when Elena's husband, Luis, took off from Miami. So much for young love, right? Though seriously, as I've said, tuberculosis was very contagious. So the chances that he contracted it and died as well were pretty high.
The husband.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he could have stayed, or he could go and start a new life somewhere else with another woman, which is what he ended up doing.
Oh, no.
I know. It was kind of shitty. I mean...
But they're they haven't been married long.
Exactly. That's why I was like, okay, well, he ran off with another woman, so that meant, or that implies to me that he was already seeing another woman.
Yeah.
And they had only been married for like a year and a half, maybe.
Yeah.
So Carl may have had a self-important view of himself, but he was apparently pretty smart. Maybe even bordering on genius level, but he was like the mad scientist. He definitely looked like one. He's got like the pointy white beard and little circular spectacles.
I think I did see a picture. Yeah.
He apparently had started building an airplane behind the hospital because, that's normal. And he was obsessed with the healing properties of electricity.
Oh.
In fact,
like shock therapy?
Yes. And in fact, he convinced Elena's parents that giving her electrical shocks would cure her.
Oh, no.
That sounds really pleasant, right? I couldn't exactly find out how he was shocking her, but he apparently was.
Again, the non-doctor is giving...
It seemed like I'm assuming that they...
making decisions for the patient and actually carrying them out.
Right. And, the only thing I can think of is that doctors basically said, the real doctors said, you have tuberculosis, here is what you can do, your prognosis is not good, and they sent her home. And then I'm assuming...
Maybe they thought he was some sort of mad scientist and didn't want to rule anything out.
I guess, no. I imagine that they wanted her to live and that they were probably grasping at straws. If you think about all the weird, random, organic things people do when they get cancer. And
right.
They go off to some commune in the middle of Mexico. And so kind of similar thought patterns, I guess.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, all of Carl's brain power could not save Elena, and she died almost exactly a year after she was diagnosed. So in October of 1931. And if we weren't having fun already, this is right where we do.
We're having fun.
Yes, I think so. Right?
The Count's having a lot of fun.
The Count is definitely
having
to
have even more
fun. Carl was understandably devastated by the loss of his one true love. He paid for Elena's funeral, and initially she was buried in a plot in the Key West Cemetery. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Adrienne?
Yeah, I have a few things to say. I've been there a couple times, and it's kind of in the center edge of the historic district, I guess. It's on the highest point on the island, which I think is a big fat 19 or so feet above sea level. No, it's 19 acres. 18 feet above sea level at its highest point.
So that means it's actually higher than us?
Yeah, it's
Here
on
in
a
Charleston?
hill. It's on... The cemetery is on a quote-unquote hill. But yeah, if it's 18 feet above sea level, then yes, it is incredibly higher.
Actually,
it's
not.
Solaris Hill.
Charleston is 19 feet above sea level.
So it's about the same.
Yeah, so roughly the same. So you can bury people in the ground. It's not necessarily advisable.
You can. The water table, I guess, is low enough that there's room to put somebody down there.
Yes, but when it floods, they may come up to the surface, as that occasionally happens here in Charleston.
And not surprisingly, my favorite odd adventure suggestion website / book / whatever, Atlas Obscura, has something to say about the Key West Cemetery. It's estimated, and this is a high estimate, that as many as 100,000 people have been laid to rest in the 19-acre Key West Cemetery.
That's a lot of people.
More than 3 times the number of living residents.
Woo!
The cemetery was established in 1847 after a hurricane washed bodies out from their previous location, and many of the graves are above ground, similar to New Orleans, due to the high water table. The historical marker at the cemetery itself notes that the previous location of the cemetery was near present-day Higgs Beach. That's on the south shore, sort of southern, like if you look at a map, Key West is sort of a rectangle, and the streets are all cockeyed. Like they're not north, south, east, west. They're northeast, southwest, northwest, southeast. See what I'm saying?
Yep.
So Higgs Beach is in that sort of southwest quadrant, kind of, sort of. And it was closer. So the old cemetery was closer to the water, obviously, which just seems like poor planning. If you're going to bury people, I feel like you would want to get them as far away, if you're on an island, as far away from the water as you can.
Agreed.
There are conflicting reports for the number of residents in the cemetery. The cemetery marker says 75,000, but like I said, Atlas Obscura says there could be as many as 100,000, and we really don't know. Back to Atlas Obscura. The cemetery, they say, is best known for its many unusual gravestones, and these are pretty great. Perhaps most recognized among the tombstones is that of local hypochondriac BP Pearl Roberts, which reads, "I told you I was sick." And side note, I've spent time in there, but really just experiencing it, biking around, walking around, looking at the lizards, mostly lizards. I haven't really seen any chickens there.
That's those feral chickens?
They're everywhere, and it's so cute. So
they're so cute. That sounds frightening.
I was there in March, and they had chicks. So there's like hens and chicks just walking all over, and it's so cute.
Feral chickens.
They're very cute, and they're scrawnier. Like they're not giant fat farm chickens. They're like birds. A feral cat.
This is what we call them in the South. Yard birds.
Is that a yard bird?
A yard bird.
Well, it's definitely a yard bird. Literary references abound as well, with one tombstone reading, "So long and thanks for all the fish." One of my favorite quotes ever. Another reads, "GROK, look it up." From Robert Heinlein's novel, Stranger in a Strange Land. I admittedly had no idea what any of that was, so I did look it up. Grok means to understand something deeply and on an intuitive level, to understand something thoroughly and beyond logic, to establish a deep rapport with someone. In the novel, grok is a Martian loan word that literally means to drink, but is used to indicate a situation in which one possesses a deep intuitive and spiritual understanding of something. Grok is a verb. Related words are groks, grokked, grokking. Most popular in the 1960s, go figure. The word grok is still fairly popular among technical and computer workers as well as scientists. I'm going to have to ask some people about this.
Oh. Can I read one of them?
Nope.
Dang it.
Other notable one-liners include...
You can't use the first one.
Jesus Christ, these people are horrible.
It's funny, but it's not.
I'm just resting my eyes. Devoted fan of singer Julio Iglesias.
Oh, yeah.
If you're reading this, you desperately need a hobby.
Always.
And I always dreamed of owning a small place in Key West.
But not that small.
I love all cemeteries, but there's something about seeing a bunch of iguanas, that can get pretty big, sunbathing kind of all over, that is just really even more charming. And they kind of blend in, so that if you're walking around and you stand somewhere to read or to look and you see something out of the